Every online multiplayer game suffers from some sort of cheating. Multiplayer games require players to communicate and share information with each other, and in a perfect world we could trust them to share information truthfully. But in the real world there are incentives for people to lie, and in games players have lots to gain by being dishonest. If after a chess game I asked both players to tell me the result of the match so I could adjust their ratings and positions on the leaderboard, the loser would be heavily incentivized to lie so as to maintain their rating. And if we believe their lie and change each player's ratings incorrectly, the online experience of the other player is completely degraded. The competitive integrity of our game, and by extension the enjoyment players have in it, is utterly obliterated. So as game developers we must minimize the ability of players to cheat. And to do this you must heed a fundamental truth when making online multiplayer games. You cannot trust your players. Players can alter their games in any way they want. When players play together online, they all need to share a game state. That game state might be a round of Counter-Strike on Dust, a game of Overwatch on King's Row, or a League game in Summoner's Rift. Cheating occurs when players manipulate that shared game state in a way that benefits them. They might increase their movement speed in Counter-Strike, constantly access the position of other players in an Overwatch game, also known as wall hacking, or remove the cooldown of their abilities in League of Legends. In the case of a movement speed hack, if the game is relying on all players to tell each other what their position is every second so as to ensure that everyone has the same game state, one player could simply change their position to whatever they want, whenever they want, and this would permeate to the shared game state, giving them the appearance of extreme speed or teleportation. So to prevent this, we can't rely on players to communicate between one another directly. Instead, we need an arbiter that players speak to, which relays their actions to others. In most games, this arbiter is a server, which is a computer that cannot be altered by the players in a game, and which we as developers have complete control of. The server keeps a true copy of the game state that only it can change, and this is what is shared between players. Then, when a player makes an action in-game, they will submit a request to the server for their game state to be updated. This is much more robust, because instead of players being able to alter the shared game state directly by submitting whatever info they want, the information must be first verified by the server before it is used to update the shared game state and propagated to the other players in the game. In the case of a speed hack, if a player submits a new position that is completely unrealistic compared to where they were before, the server will ignore their request and won't update the game state. On the cheater's screen they might be flying all over the place, but all the other players in the game won't see this because the server has not updated the shared game state with the cheater's actions. In the chess example I mentioned earlier, because we have the true game state on our server that cannot be tampered with, once the game is over, we do not need to ask the players who won, because we already have that information. Using this kind of networking architecture known as the client-server model, where players are the clients and the server is the ultimate authority in the game, makes cheating far harder. Compare this to other networking topologies like peer-to-peer, where there is no server, but instead players communicate somewhat directly with each other. Cheating in this environment is child's play. Using a client-server model can theoretically allow you to eradicate cheating of almost any kind. In the case of wall hacks, you just don't give players the positions of others unless they are in line of sight. With ability cooldowns, you will only allow players to activate their abilities if the cooldown has finished on the server's game state, ignoring whatever the client state may be. So why then are aimbots impossible to get rid of? Well, it's because in the case of aiming, clients have complete authority over where they are aiming. In FPSs, the server does not get a say in where the client aims. I will tell the server I am aiming here when my shot was fired, and the server cannot tell me, no you weren't.
Are you sure about that?
There is no absolute way of verifying that a player's aim is being manipulated by software, or whether it's just a good gaming chair. While we have relinquished the client of any authority it has over the shared game state, such as position, health and damage, we cannot take their authority over input into the game, of which mouse movement is one of. So in this way, aimbotting is something online games cannot abolish in the same way as other types of cheating that involve manipulating the shared game state. For now, developers only have two main options. First is trying to proactively prevent aimbots from even being used via the installation of kernel-level anti-cheat software on client computers. This allows game developers to see what software is running on a client's computer, and if that includes known cheating software, can lead to an account ban. However, this is only as good as the anti-cheat software and doesn't completely prevent aimbots. Like any anti-cheat, it requires that the cheating software be correctly identified, and failure to do this makes it essentially worthless. The second option is to reactively identify players using aimbots via a reporting system, in-game footage and other metrics to track suspicious activity. Naturally, this doesn't prevent aimbots from being used, but an effective reporting system can minimize the impact aimbots have on other players. Of course, this doesn't work too well in games that have zero barrier to entry, like free-to-play games, because aimbotters can and will just make new accounts as soon as they get banned. But in games where players must sink time or money into a new account before playing online, it is a legitimate option. Controlling cheating in multiplayer games is hard, and by creating competitive social online environments, we increase the incentives for cheating. But our only option as developers is to do everything we can to minimize the ability for players to cheat. Otherwise, the multiplayer experience will be ruined and your game deserted.